Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Talk to Defeat ALS podcast. I'm your host, Tony Heil, the Director of Communications and Public Policy here at the ALS Association Greater Philadelphia chapter. We have a lot of different topics on care services on our whole podcast history with about 100 different episodes, all you can find online on our website or on iTunes and Stitcher and things like that. And today we're going to be talking again with Elisa Brownlee, who's been helping us with a lot of care services tips. And one thing that's very important to people, especially with how you're probably getting this podcast, is social media. We advertise Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and various other things. And sometimes you want to know how to navigate it safely, want to know where to get good resources, and how to use it as a person with ALS who may have some difficulties using a computer or just are unsure what to do. We want to make sure to do it right. So, Elisa, thank you again for joining us.
Sure.
You have a long history with this. This is kind of your starting point.
Yes.
With here was some of these online groups, but obviously that's a lot different from then, way back in the late 90s.
Yeah. When we only had one national ALS listserv, and that was it. And it wasn't even interactive. You know, you would post a question, and then hopefully you'd get answers within the next day or two.
Right.
It wasn't like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram now, where you post a question, you can probably get a response in less than a minute.
Right, and sometimes good, sometimes bad.
Correct, and that's what I think. I mean, you have to remember that everything that you're reading on the internet is not necessarily true. And that, yes, I know, said, shocking.
Right? I remember Abraham Lincoln with that.
Yes, but also that, if you are seeking out information with ALS, every individual with ALS is different. There are no two people with this disease that are the same. So what might work for someone with ALS is not necessarily going to work for you. And so it's important to know that and be able to filter that. And also have the wherewithal to say, I saw that on a Facebook group, but I don't know. Let me call my nurse or my doctor.
So there's a lot of different formats.
Yes.
Should we just go in order of the different kinds of formats, or do you want to go over generally?
Well, for me, the easiest way to get information disseminated is on Facebook. Right.
And there's over 1 billion, there's like 2 billion people on Facebook.
And every day, even though, you hear that, their stocks are going down and it's not as popular, there are still thousands of people that join Facebook every day.
I'm not losing any sleep over Mark Zuckerberg losing
Right.
But if he wants to donate money to us, he's welcome.
And people do it for a variety of reasons. And sometimes the main reason is because they have this devastating illness and they want to connect with other people.
Right.
So there's a significant number of Facebook groups. Some of them are closed, some of them are open. So what that means is a closed group is that you have to send a request to the administrator, and the administrator has to approve you to be part of the group. And sometimes that means that you have to say and or prove that you have a diagnosis of whatever illness, in this case ALS. So that's a closed group. An open group means anyone can join, whether or not you have the disease or not. So there are some rather large Facebook groups. I know I participate in a few of them, Patient and Caregiver Tips for Everyday Living with ALS. That's a great group. And ALS, we are in it together. And then there's also just some groups for caregivers.
And these are all independently run.
Correct.
So we have our Facebook page at ALS Philadelphia, which is going to showcase some things we've written, these podcasts, information about our clinics and ALS generally, and events. But these are not run by the ALS Association. Correct. So we're not endorsing them, but you have used them and have seen them that they're usually run well.
Right. And they're not necessarily monitored. I mean, sometimes you can notify the administrator if you see an offensive post or something that you don't necessarily think should be there. But it can be a conduit for people to meet other people. there's been a lot of, speculation. Oh, the ALS Association should have a 24-hour hotline for people that just want to connect with other people. Well, that's probably not realistic. But what ends up happening is that you have a caregiver who can't sleep at 2 a.m. and they get on Facebook into one of their sites and they can talk to another person who's up at 2 a.m. And commiserate together or celebrate together or just talk.
And a lot of people are up at 2 a.m.
Correct.
Especially with ALS.
Yes.
There's a lot of caregivers who are up all hours of night and having those groups or chats.
Correct. And the same thing with the person with ALS. If they want to connect with somebody else. Or what I've seen some of these groups will do is that, hi, I live in Waco, Texas. Anyone in this group from around here or around there? And so they can actually then say, oh, okay, and then they can self-identify, oh, you're near me, and then they can either chat offline, they can continue to chat on Facebook, so that they can actually make a local connection. And this is really crucial for people that can't leave their home. Unfortunately, we see as the disease progresses, sometimes social isolation sets in because you can't leave your home might not be accessible, and so, or that you are simply too physically depleted to go anywhere, so that you are relying more and more on social media to stay connected to the world. And this is how people do it. So being able to reach out to people, but also, I again caution you, reach out, but you have to do it kind of, with caution.
Trust but verify,
Exactly. I saw one time in a group post, my caregiver blends my food and puts it through the feeding tube. Okay, well, that might work for that person, but your neurologist might say you can't do that, or your dietitian or something. So just because someone posts it doesn't mean it will work for you. And if you feel like, hey, that's a valid point, or maybe I could ask my doctor, ask your doctor before you do it.
So and that's very important because a lot of things seem intuitive.
Yes.
Like that. So if it comes to eating, if it comes to medication,
yes.
If it comes to general care, healthcare type issues, talk to a professional, talk to your neurologist, your nurse, your dietitian, your social worker.
Yes, whoever.
Talk, whether it's yours or maybe it's even a family member that's a nurse. Talk to someone that knows what they're doing before you do what you saw on Facebook.
Correct.
Now,
yes.
If it's something where you went on Facebook and someone said, hey, I use my Amazon Echo to watch Netflix, you don't necessarily have to talk to your nurse.
Exactly, right. But if it's something medically or involving your body, invasive or not, yes, you ask.
Yeah.
I like you just said, trust but verify.
Right.
But that being said, it is such a wonderful forum to get ideas, or for someone to say, I have this problem where my loved one, needs to, prop his foot up. What would you recommend? And then so you get the recommendations, and then you say, okay, but then you bring it to your medical team and ask. But it's nice to have more than one thing because, again, it might not work for you. But then you kind of go down the list of ideas that you've come up with.
And that's something we brought up in our episode about the clinic, is to ask questions there. Social media, Facebook in particular, could be a great place to find questions to ask and be prepared when you go to your next clinic visit. And someone who has ALS you've met through one of these groups can say, when I had that inflammation, it meant this. So make sure to talk to your nurse about it.
Right.
So that could be a very good tool with these Facebook groups, is to know what questions to ask your caregivers.
Right. And I also think exactly what you said. You mentioned the Echo just a few minutes ago. There's a significant number of people who are using their speech generating device, and they'll say, guess what I just found in the software that really works well. That's great. Right. You might not know that it was there.
Yeah.
Or that I set up my SGD page to have, XYZ so that I can order pizza and have it delivered and blah, blah, blah. That's great. That's great sharing of information. Something you might not think about.
Right. And it's not something where if you did it, you would be harming yourself.
Correct.
So first, as with a doctor, do no harm if you can, especially to yourself.
Right. And I encourage everyone, and I know hopefully a lot of people from this area are listening to this podcast, but if you're outside of our area, connect with your local ALS association on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. You will get information. You'll get sometimes tips, caregiving tips. You'll hear about local events, local walks, so that you can stay connected to your local ALS association. That to me is real vital. We provide a tremendous resource, and there's things that the chapter might be doing that you have no idea that are coming up. And so go to that person or that chapter's Facebook page or Twitter page or Instagram and follow them.
And I follow our other chapters sometimes on Facebook, and I learn a lot about what they're doing. Sometimes it's really good information that then I can replicate on our page or on our Twitter pages. So you can use it to find groups. You can follow the ALS Association chapters and the ALS Association itself. It's at almost 1 million followers on the ALS page. Ours is only 5,600, so hopefully everyone follows us and we get a huge boost out of this. But try and get up to 1 million. And, there's a lot of, I hate the word fake news. I think that's stupid. But not to offend people who don't think it's stupid. But
misinformation.
Right. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So if it sounds good, verify it with someone who knows better.
Correct. And
don't share until you verify it.
Yeah, that's true too. And I guess this is just me personally. I think Facebook is just easier to connect with other people than Instagram.
Oh yeah. But you can't share with Instagram really.
Correct. And for me, listen, I'm a sequential order kind of girl. I want to say most recent. I still can't do that in Instagram. So, that's why I prefer Facebook and the groups that are on Facebook as opposed to Instagram. But my other go-to is always Twitter.
Right. So Twitter.com, there are some very famous people on Twitter.
Yes.
And everyone's on Twitter.
Yes.
And it can be an amazing, I love Twitter myself. I think it's a great resource to connect with people. So what's the difference for a person with ALS for Twitter versus Facebook?
Well, Twitter considers themselves a microblogging account. So you can't post a whole soliloquy on Twitter unless you do it in Word and take a picture of it or connect it to your Facebook account. But for me...
You could do a tweet thread, though.
Yes, you can do a tweet thread. That is correct.
Which can take a while and it can be interesting.
Correct. But for a person trying to use a speech-generating device, it might take longer and more hits or clicks or typing. But I use Twitter to filter. So Twitter uses something called hashtags, and a hashtag is just the pound sign. Okay? So if you're on Twitter...
a lot of people who are under... Let's say under 30 or don't even know that it's a pound sign.
I know.
It's just a hashtag.
I know that. But if you're on Twitter and at the top right-hand corner, it'll say search, at least on your computer, and it'll be on the top of your smartphone. And you put hashtag ALS. And anything that's been tagged with that hashtag will come up. So you might see an individual with ALS posting something, or a chapter posting a picture or an article or a link about ALS. I find the majority of my information on Twitter about ALS and assistive technology and speech-generating devices and communication disorders, but that's just my preferred venue. But I think it depends on what you're looking for. For me, I just want to see the highlights. That's why I go to Twitter, because you can only see, well, now it's 240 characters?
Yeah, it's 240 characters, but most things aren't that long.
Correct. So you see the highlights and then you decide to click on it or not. But it's another venue to reach out and meet people. And then, you can put your hashtag, for example, if you were just looking for articles or information about caregiving. So hashtag caregiving. It'll all come up.
And some of these hashtags can be very specific. So you can start your own hashtag. So you can start a hashtag ALS caregiving, or you can tell a lot of people we're talking about the Walk to Defeat ALS, or the Lehigh Valley Walk to Defeat ALS. It might be LV Walk to Defeat ALS as a hashtag. So everyone's in that conversation, which is
correct.
Nice. And I was just looking on on Twitter now, because a lot of people, I bet, with ALS do use a mobile device to tweet.
Right? I would say
most of
over 80% of them use a smartphone of some sort.
Right. And for at least on my Android device, you can see the home. I'm showing this on the podcast. But so the home will get you to the latest tweets. There's the magnifying glass to search, and you can search for people or things. The alerts for your mentions. And then there's the DMs, the direct messages, which is a good way to communicate. My mom communicates with me that way. Not that I want to get away from my mom, but she lives 300 miles away, and she can get in touch with me 100 different ways if she wants to, which is great for caregivers.
Right. And if you want to promote yourself or a cause, you can actually link all three together. Mm-hmm. You can link your Twitter with your Facebook with your Instagram. So that if you post on Twitter, it'll be posted both on Facebook and Instagram, and vice versa. If you post on Facebook, it'll be posted on the other two sites. So you can link all three together if you just want to be on all three forums, but you don't want to have to go, I got to post this on Twitter, I want to go post that on Instagram. So instead of going to three individual apps, they're all linked together as one.
And it's also a really good way to message people who you might not be able to message otherwise.
Correct.
That could be a care service, you, and how do they get in touch with you on Twitter?
ALS Assistive Tech, but no H.
So with a TEC at the end.
Yeah.
And ours is ALS Philadelphia. We get a buzz, so if you send a tweet, you can have a question about an event, about caregiving, about clinics, about times of things, about how to donate, about why didn't I hear back from someone? And then we'll get that message across. Right. So it's a great way where if you don't know the best way to get in touch with someone, a tweet can definitely get someone's attention.
Yeah, and just my perception, but we have more of an international reach on Twitter than we do on Facebook.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
And to me, it's fascinating to see what people with ALS MND are doing over in the UK or in Australia. And I see that on Twitter more than I see it on Facebook.
And when you go on a page, you can connect with other chapters, so you can find out what's going on there. You can see who's liked a certain post. You can find other organizations that are tweeting about ALS. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're sponsored tweets. But there are lots of ways that you get in touch, learn about people. And you could also tweet at famous people or teams.
That's right.
We're the principal charity of the Philadelphia Phillies, so they'll often, I tweeted at them saying great pitching, and they liked my tweet or retweeted it. So that, you can send your picture from an event, and whether it's a sponsor or the clinic, they might appreciate that. Don't put information on there you don't want the world to see.
That's exactly right. And know that whatever you put up, even if you take down, it'll be there forever.
Right. We've heard that. So be careful about what you rant about and, what you say. So try to not curse and say inflammatory things if you can.
But I actually think, just to follow up with what you just said, is that it's a great way to raise awareness. And we hear all the time, people have to be more aware of ALS and things. If you're having even a local event, a local lemonade stand, and you have a group of kids and, a neighborhood rallying around you, take a picture, tweet it, put the hashtag ALS, and send it to your local news station. You don't know, they might pick it up. It's a great way to raise awareness.
There are so many reporters in the area, in our chapter region, who have covered ALS, who care about it. You can, look them up on Google to find out who's covered it.
Correct.
A lot of them have their own Twitter account, so you can find the person from ABC who's done the Ice Bucket Challenge, for example.
Right.
You say, tweet at them and say, hey, Allie Gorman at 6ABC, I know that you care about ALS, and send there's a very good chance that they will at very least retweet it to their thousands of members.
Exactly. And again, this all goes back to raising awareness.
Yeah.
And
anyone can do it now. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars on an ad campaign. You can just message someone that knows.
Right. We don't need, to spend, an individual doesn't need to hire a PR agency anymore to really get the word out.
Nothing against PR agencies.
No, nothing against PR agencies. But in the past, that's the only way that you could disseminate your message.
Right.
Now, you're right. You can tweet at a famous person or even, like you said, start a hashtag of your own just to get the raising of awareness. You and I have bantered back and forth on one of our local radio stations, and they've mentioned ALS, and you've said, thank you. to this local radio, and you tweet it,
Right.
appreciate the shout out,
and then they retweet it.
Right.
And then say, oh, it's going to be on at 6 a.m. tomorrow.
Right. And it's amazing the difference that social media has made in terms of people who I run into now who know what ALS is, and not just from the Ice Bucket Challenge, but I think just for the advent of the internet and us being able to put a face to the disease besides Lou Gehrig.
And again, there's a lot of bad information that's on Twitter.
Yes,
some
of course.
terrible information sometimes. Some crazy people are on there. Snake oil salesmen, as they're called. So if you see something that looks sketchy, even if it doesn't, contact someone that is an expert. So
right.
If you see someone that says, you should be really taking this kind of vitamin or this pill, this is going to make you feel stronger, don't do that until you talk to your care team.
Right. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who say they can cure any disease. It's not just ALS.
Right.
Through XYZ.
Right. And that could be not just a drug, but it could be food, it could be exercise of some sort. There's lots of things that may sound fine, and they might not do anything, but it might waste your time, too.
Well, and it could be illegal.
Right, exactly.
That's the other thing you have to worry about,
Right, and you won't know that. You're just preying on people who
exactly
honestly want something done. So it's also a very good tool for advocacy.
Yes.
When we go meet with politicians, like 100% of them are on Twitter, like maybe 99.9. And if we go and we meet with the senator and say, hey, Senator Coons from Delaware, thank you for meeting with the Colbys, who are on Twitter.
Right.
And they're great people, and they always send that, and then he tweets it out, and he's a co-sponsor on legislation because he's reminded that he met with this family from Delaware.
Right. Yeah, and I have to say, that's where Twitter surpasses Facebook.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, yeah, that's my feeling, too.
And for those that don't know, the ALS National Office has a advocacy event every year in May. Now it's going to be June of next year.
Right.
Where people throughout the country descend on D.C. and we basically storm the Hill on one particular day, and it's all about ALS. And I was fortunate enough to go this year, and Tony's right. We took pictures with Senator Toomey. We had a whole group picture, all of us that were in the room with the senator. You tweeted it to him. He retweeted it.
Right. So
so it got information. So anybody who follows Senator Toomey that day saw the ALS Association picture.
And then if you weren't able to come to D.C. that day, you could see it and say, thank you for meeting with my friends.
Right.
Are you going to co-sponsor the legislation?
Correct. Right. And also, we used, there was a hashtag for advocacy. I think it was ALS Advocacy
Day 18.
Yeah. So if I was just sitting at home, I could follow along with anybody who did that hashtag. But again, Tony's right. When we're looking for things out of our advocacy action alert, yes, send an email, but follow it up with a tweet or on Facebook,
Sometimes
put the pressure on.
A tweet is often better than an email.
I know. I agree.
And I feel like since I've done advocacy which I've done for years, everyone sends emails, but politicians get a ton of emails, and news organizations get a ton of emails, but they don't actually reach the senator or reporter. Whereas a tweet, very often, which surprises people, it is the senator that reads them. It is the governor sometimes that reads them, and it is the reporter that reads them. But there's a reporter from the Lehigh Valley at WFMZ, Bo Coltnow, who's terrific. He's done a lot of ALS things. We'll tweet him, and it's him that saw it and said, I saw you on Twitter. Yeah, we want to bring you in to talk about this.
And if you look even at current events right now, people don't say, oh, look what so-and-so put on Facebook. It's, look what so-and-so tweeted.
Right.
Look at the tweet that got this person in trouble or that got generated so much response.
Right.
It's not what people are putting on Instagram and Facebook.
Right. So speaking of Instagram, so we can talk about that. Is there anything interesting to talk about ALS on Instagram? It's just another way you can share.
It's just another sharing of mostly pictures, though, with Instagram.
Right.
But you can do Instagram stories. But Instagram, again, uses hashtags.
Right.
So if you want your cause, your event to be noticed, statistically, research has found you have to use a hashtag.
And use a bunch of them.
Yes.
On Twitter, you have a character limit. On Instagram,
You don't.
You don't really. And I think there's like a 10,000 character. It's a ridiculous character limit. But so people put up often very general ones. Like I have kids, so I'll put up like toddler time or toddler fun. But then there might be a very specific one you want to put down that only the people who know about that will know. Like Frosty Falls Ice Cream, which is the ice cream place near me, so people would see that. But that might be a good place for people to go, and you can search for hashtag caregiving tips.
Well, and Instagram is nice because when you hit a hashtag, it tells you how many people have used that hashtag. So just as a personal example, my daughter turned 14 a few months ago, and I put an Instagram post up of her, and I put, I love my daughter. Well, that hashtag had been like over 1 million hits or something. It's like, wow. But you can see then if you're doing like a hashtag ALS or ALS symposium or, ALS fundraiser, you can see how many times that hashtag's been used.
Right. And sometimes that's a good reason to use one that has a lot of views. Sometimes you want something that has lesser for whatever reason. Sometimes you can find something that's very localized. So, you want to talk about healthcare. Everyone's talking about healthcare, but you want to talk about healthcare that's in Pennsylvania, PA healthcare might be a hashtag, and that it might be one you start.
Right.
So there's a lot of pictures, resources you can find that way on Instagram.
But if you were using Instagram without Facebook, I would say get on Twitter too and link those two.
Yeah.
Because again, Tony's right. The politicians, the people in office, they're noticing Twitter. They are not noticing Instagram.
Sometimes they notice Instagram.
Sometimes.
But not to the same extent. Not nearly. Because Twitter is so much more public.
Yes.
Now, two other things. One I want to bring up really quickly is Pinterest, which we have done a little bit. And I'll just say quickly, it can be an interesting way of finding out, certain things you can find on there for a whole search of outfits to wear, which isn't a dumb thing with ALS, because it could be things that you could wear that you wouldn't think of because they're hard to button.
Correct.
So you can find those things, and also some food items. We've done that on our Pinterest page, which we don't update often, but you might be able to go there to find some recipes and things to eat that have been approved by some group that might seem good.
Yeah.
And then finally, YouTube. There's a lot of YouTube videos on our page, ALS Philadelphia. There's a lot of videos on there that could be training videos for caregivers, whether they're us or other resources.
And national,
the ALS Association. So look on those pages. Some of the hospitals have them. And our podcasts are shared on YouTube as well, so you can watch them online. But, there's a lot of good resources on YouTube, and there's a lot of crazy resources on YouTube.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I saw just a statistic, I want to say a couple weeks ago, that said among the 18 to 24 age group, in the past it was Instagram that was number one to get information on social media, and Facebook number two, and now it's YouTube. For that age group. That is how they are getting their information. And now YouTube has a subscriber service, a plus service. I think it's YouTube Red or something.
Yeah.
So we have to recognize that the avenues of social media are changing with the age groups. The advent of kids, what I jokingly say, coming out of the womb and knowing how to text with 2 thumbs. I still can't do that. But they know. You put a smartphone in the hands of a child who's never held one, and they know what to do with it.
Yeah, I have a 4.5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. They know how to find things on YouTube, and we monitor. But they use a tablet, and they are able to find. Thankfully, they want to watch Blippi, which is great. It's actually a pretty good show. But the information that's on YouTube is not always right.
Correct.
And know that what you're looking for, but also a lot of people with ALS have kids. We know people with ALS have young kids, whether they're their own or nieces, nephews, grandkids, and they might be finding some incorrect information out there. So if you know that, be aware, be social media savvy enough to direct them to the right resources, and tell people, like, hey, my son found this online.
Right.
what should I do? What can I direct them to?
Right. And I would say, like, for example, if you were looking for information about how to do a proper transfer,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be different for somebody with MS than ALS.
Very good point.
So you want to go to ALS trusted resources. So go to the National ALS Association, go to other ALS chapters. Anything that a chapter or the national office is going to put up has been vetted by professionals to know that the information that they're disseminating is correct.
And if it's not there yet, you can go and say, hey, Elisa, I know you're social media savvy. There's no video about this activity.
Correct.
Can you create one?
Right.
Or can you find one that you trust to use?
Correct, and send me the link.
Right.
Right.
Because, like you said, a person with ALS may have very different needs than a person with MS, and vice versa.
Correct. Absolutely. And as I mentioned before, what works for one person isn't going to work for you.
Right.
So go to trusted sources, especially when it's about a video, something that you're watching and going, okay, I'm learning from this. The majority of people are visual learners. So you and I can talk about things, but they want to see it in action.
Mm-hmm.
And so they go to YouTube to see it in action.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to make sure that what you're seeing in action is accurate.
Now, on the other hand, posting videos, it could be a really good resource for you.
Absolutely.
If you're a caregiver with ALS, you might be able to put up some resources of food you make that's good. Maybe, like we talked about the Amazon Echo a bunch of times, like, oh, here's how I used it for my home. You could put up a YouTube, and those videos probably exist already because there are like trillions of videos. You could say, here are my tips for, a shopping list.
Mm-hmm.
And you could put that on Pinterest too, like my shopping list for keeping at home.
Or how about starting a dialogue about how to accept help in the home?
Right.
Using social media websites like Caring Bridge or others to coordinate care. Because we know people have friends in the community. They have church members. Everyone wants to help.
Right.
But how to coordinate that help? And that's, again, where social media can come in. There are specific websites to help with that. But if you can't do that, then you can do it through Facebook.
Yeah.
Like so-and-so, you put out a need. Okay, I need 3 casseroles this week. All right, you're going to get responses from Arnold. Yep, I'll do Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Marion says, I'll do Thursday.
Right.
And so you could put out the need and just use social media to do that, or you can use some of these special websites that help you facilitate coordinating care in the home.
Right.
But we didn't have that before. If you had a need where you had you needed your lawn cut, before we had the internet, you just have to ask a neighbor or a local teenager,
Right, and you might not be able to do that because you can't get out of the house to do it.
Exactly. So now you can post the need, and hopefully people can fulfill that need.
Right, and there's lots of tools to do that.
Yes.
Ask questions. We talked about this in our episode about the clinics. Ask a million questions, hopefully less than a million, but ask as many questions as you can. Find out where you can find the best resources. Talk to your clinic team to say, I heard this rumor online, this thing on Facebook, is this true?
Especially about drugs. New drugs or things. I heard that. Yeah, definitely ask that question.
You've been working on the clinics for many years.
Yeah.
You've probably heard hundreds, more thousands of questions about drug-type treatments.
Right.
That you're like, whoa, don't do that.
Right. Well, that or I heard this drug is coming. Well, yeah, but it's in clinical trial, only stage 2. That means, X amount of time.
Right. Now, one thing about that, too, is the information that can be online about clinical trials can often provide false hope or false worry even. So not that they're bad people talking about this all the time, but you might go online and say, oh, XYZ company has a phase 2 clinical trial. There's going to be a drug on the market in December, which one is wrong. That's not how trials work. But 2, you don't engage until you can talk to someone that knows
Exactly.
best.
Exactly. Yeah. So reach out to your clinic team, reach out to your nurse, your social worker, reach out to your PR person. Ask Tony.
You can even reach out to the people who are doing those studies.
Yeah.
Because sometimes and this is actually interesting. I realized this recently. A lot of the people who have studies and journals that you can't access because they're in a journal and it costs money, they'll send you the study.
Right.
So
they want to get it out there, right?
So message them and learn, but realize that for the most part, you're not an expert. I'm not an expert. So it's always good to get a second opinion. So if I say, oh, Lisa Brownlee posted this article about this drug and she did this, I'm going to read it and know it. Now, maybe ask another person who's a nurse or neurologist, like, what do you think about this? Everyone's more accessible today than they were 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
That's very true.
Which is good and bad.
Yes.
More good than bad, I think. So use social media wisely. Find out someone that can help you vet it. That's the most important thing I think we can discuss. So is there anything else we should focus on? Because we've had a lot to say about social media and ALS.
No. I think that for me and for our population, social media can be a wonderful avenue to stay connected to the world.
Yeah.
And it offers something that we haven't really, now we have for 10 years or so, I think, however old Facebook is now, but just a connection that often got lost in the past.
Well, and I know when I got here 7 years ago, the ALS, our chapter page had 700 followers. Now we have about 6,000.
Yeah.
So that's great, but you want to be able to use it appropriately.
Yeah.
Everyone's engaging it in new ways because Facebook itself changes.
Right.
So speaking of Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and Pinterest and Twitter, follow us all at ALS Philadelphia. Look up the ALS Association on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram as well. They're all using the same information, different posts they might put up, but same useful information. And follow Elisa on Twitter, ALS Assistive Tech TEC on Twitter, and ask her questions any time of day, and she'll respond to you when appropriate.
Yes, thank you. When appropriate.
And of course, if you want to donate, volunteer, advocate, visit us at www.alsphiladelphia.org. Thank you, Elisa.
Thank you.